Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history, the show where we dive into the past, shake it up like a snow globe, and try to make sense of why every important event in human civilization apparently scheduled itself for December 10th. I don't know who the cosmic administrative assistant is that organizes history's calendar, but they clearly have a sense of humor, because this date is stacked. December 10th isn't a page in history. It's a Costco palette of revolutions, shipwrecks, monarch meltdowns, and the jet age. All sitting next to a Nobel Prize ceremony like the classy neighbor who insists they didn't hear the chaos happening next door. So buckle up, because today we've got Luther burning paperwork, Newton redefining the universe, Ada Lovelace inventing the future, Emily Dickinson inventing the feeling of being alive, the United States buying an empire like it's Black Friday, the British monarchy unraveling faster than a cheap Christmas sweater, and human rights getting their own birthday. Oh, and also Otis Redding, the jet age, Pinochet's highly symbolic exit, and Argentina electing its first female president. December 10th really said, humanity, drop everything, we're doing all of it today. Segment 1. Luther lights the match heard around the world. December 10th, 1520. Martin Luther steps out in Wittenberg, walks up to the Elster Gate, a location literally used for burning plague clothing, and says, "Yeah, this looks like the perfect backdrop for my theological TED Talk." He takes the papal bull Exsurge Domine, the 41-count indictment against him, and throws it into a fire, like a guy returning his engagement ring by hurling it into a volcano. This was not a heat-of-the-moment decision. This was the theological equivalent of ghosting the Pope and setting his letters on fire. Luther tosses the bull in, then the canon law books, and basically declares, "Your move, Rome." Meanwhile, German students gather around like this is the original Coachella, chanting, dancing, burning textbooks, probably inventing the first protest playlist. The moment the smoke hit the sky, a compromise became impossible. Luther wasn't just saying no to the Pope. He was saying no to the entire hierarchy, the legal system, the centuries of structure that held up medieval Christianity. And in return, medieval Christianity said, okay, enjoy excommunication and also potential death. A real win-win. But from this bonfire came the idea that individual conscience could stand up to institutional power, the beginning of the modern notion of sovereignty inside the human mind. Also, the beginning of a very long list of people claiming, "I'm just like Luther," when really, they're just mad that Starbucks messed up their order. Segment 2. Newton proofs the universe like a guy solving a puzzle no one asked him to solve. Fast forward to December 10th, 1684. Over in London, the Royal Society is meeting, probably with powdered wigs adjusted to earnest intellectual discussion mode, when Edmund Halley stands up and reads a paper by Isaac Newton titled De Motu Corporum in Gyrum, on the motion of bodies in an orbit. What this really meant was Newton finally showed his work. Halley had walked into Cambridge months earlier and casually asked, "Hey Isaac, what force would produce planetary orbits?" And Newton, in the most Isaac Newton way possible, said, "Oh, I did that years ago, but lost the paper. I lose takeout menus. Newton loses the mathematical explanation of the solar system." So he rewrites it. Halley brings it to London, and suddenly, the heavens, the earth, the tides, the apples falling on heads, all of it exists under one unified mathematical law. This was the day humans officially said goodbye to the old cosmos, where angels nudged planets around like celestial babysitters, and hello to the cold, elegant machinery of gravity. It's funny, Luther burned a document on December 10th. Newton basically lit one on metaphorical fire. Both changed the world, only Newton's didn't require a permit. Segment 3. Ada Lovelace and Emily Dickinson. December 10th creates two women decades ahead of everyone. December 10th really likes to produce overachievers. In 1815, it gives us Ada Lovelace, mathematician, visionary, and the world's first computer programmer. Her mom wanted to make sure Ada didn't inherit her father, Lord Byron's, flair for dramatic chaos. So she raised her on math. That's right. The world's first programmer started coding because she was enrolled in medieval-era therapy. Ada not only wrote the first algorithm, she imagined the modern computer. While Babbage thought of numbers, she thought of symbols, music, language, creativity. She literally predicted Spotify before electricity existed. Then in 1830, Emily Dickinson is born, the reclusive poet whose internal universe was richer than most people's social lives. While Ada imagined the architecture of computing, Dickinson built the architecture of the soul, with dashes, so many dashes. The woman wrote poems like she was sending coded messages to the 21st century. Together, Ada and Emily represent the mind turned inward and outward, logic and lyricism, the machine and the mystery. December 10th said, yeah, we're doubling up today. Segment 4. Wyoming invents equality and the U.S. invents empire. December 10th, 1869. Wyoming Territory becomes the first government on Earth to give women full voting rights. And why? Because its legislature wanted to attract women to settle the territory, and they thought the governor would veto it. This is what happens when political trolling backfires and produces social progress. The governor signs it. Wyoming becomes the suffrage pioneer, and by the time they apply for statehood in 1890, Congress tells them to give up women's voting rights. And Wyoming responds, we will remain out of the Union 100 years rather than come in without the women. Honestly, Wyoming was out here dropping mic drops before microphones existed. Then December 10th, 1898 arrives, and the U.S. signs the Treaty of Paris, purchasing the Philippines and seizing Guam and Puerto Rico, while Spain collapses like a historic Jenga tower. Suddenly, America is no longer a country with borders. It's a country with holdings. Imperialists celebrate. Mark Twain joins the Anti-Imperialist League and asks America why it suddenly thinks it's a Pokemon trainer collecting islands. December 10th, simultaneously advancing human rights and creating an empire. A fun little day of contradictions. Segment 5, Nobel Day, the world's fancy participation trophy ceremony. December 10th becomes Nobel Prize Day because Alfred Nobel died on this date in 1896 and apparently wanted to atone for inventing dynamite by handing out medals and cash to people who invented slightly less explosive things. Every year, Stockholm and Oslo host ceremonies so opulent they make award shows look modest. And over the decades, we get Henry Dunant, Teddy Roosevelt, Ralph Bunche, Martin Luther King Jr., the 1994 trio of the Oslo Accords, a Nobel Prize moment where everyone said, this'll work out, and history said, LOL, no. And yes, Barack Obama getting one early, like a student receiving a gold star for showing up to class with a sharpened pencil. It's the one ceremony where scientists, poets, economists, and peace negotiators all get seated together and collectively pretend they enjoyed the dinner speeches. Segment 6, Edward VIII abdicates, the plot twist that created Queen Elizabeth II. December 10th, 1936. King Edward VIII signs the instrument of abdication so he can marry Wallis Simpson. The British monarchy panics. Parliament panics. Every newspaper in the empire panics. And Edward says, basically, look, I can be king or I can be married, but apparently I can't multitask. What follows is the quickest legal sprint in monarchy history. Parliament passes the Abdication Act. Edward leaves, becomes Duke of Windsor, and the throne goes to his brother, George VI, who absolutely did not sign up for this. And from that surprise ascension eventually comes Queen Elizabeth II. December 10th didn't just rewrite the monarchy, it rewrote the next century of British global identity. And all because one man prioritized love, and possibly also fancy vacations, over the crown. Segment 7, the sinking of Force Z. Battleships discover they are not birds. December 10th, 1941. 3 days after Pearl Harbor, Britain sends two massive warships, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, towards Southeast Asia without air cover. because someone in command apparently believed battleships were allergic to gravity. Japan responds with 88 bombers who show that air power beats boat power isn't just a theory. Both ships sink. Over 800 lives are lost. Churchill calls it one of the greatest shocks of the war. And naval strategy pivots overnight from big boats equals power to planes equals please don't sink us. This is the day the aircraft carrier becomes king, and battleships become floating nostalgia pieces. Segment 8. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Humanity makes a group project that actually works. December 10th, 1948. The UN adopts the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, written by an international Avengers team of philosophers, diplomats, and idealists, all trying to make sure World War II never happens again. Article 1 says, all humans are born free and equal. Articles 3, 5, 19, the big ones, guarantee life, dignity, freedom, speech. Nobody votes against it, but a few countries abstain because rights are complicated when you're trying to run an authoritarian government. It becomes the foundation for nearly every human rights movement of the next century. This is humanity's syllabus for how not to treat each other like garbage. And honestly, still a work in progress. Segment 9. Jets, Otis Redding, dictators exiting stage left, and Argentina breaks a ceiling. December 10th continues showing off. In 1958, the first U.S. domestic jet service takes off, making Florida suddenly accessible to millions of people who previously thought vacation meant drive until the kids stop complaining. In 1967, Otis Redding tragically dies in a plane crash, leaving behind a voice that made the world feel both electric and human at the same time. His posthumous song, Dock of the Bay, becomes a masterpiece that feels like prophecy. In 1993, astronauts fixed the Hubble Space Telescope, giving humanity the ability to stare into the abyss with clarity, instead of squinting like it's a blurry phone photo. In 2006, Pinochet dies on Human Rights Day, which is the universe showing it has excellent comedic timing. And Chile splits between mourning and relief. And in 2007, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner becomes Argentina's first female elected president, proving December 10th has a real thing for history-making women. In conclusion, December 10th is less a date and more a historical group chat where everyone refuses to stop posting. It's a day of fire and flight, abdications and declarations, births that shape the soul, and deaths that symbolize justice coming full circle. December 10th reminds us that history isn't slow. It's chaotic, emotional, contradictory, and constantly reinventing itself. If there is a theme to this day, it's sovereignty. The sovereignty of the individual, the sovereignty of nations, and the sovereignty of humanity's deep desire to organize itself, and then reorganize itself again the moment everything catches on fire. December 10th is the world saying, let's try something new, and sometimes let's never do that again. But always, always pay attention. It matters.